We all are only 1 degree removed from knowing someone who is being impacted by workplace violence or some form of online exploitation. This issue filters into employee wellness, impacting engagement at work. Let's bridge this gap by bringing awareness and education to these pressing issues and shield the vulnerable. Hello and welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Shield the Vulnerable, Untold Stories. I have a really cool guest here today. It's Victoria Rivera, who operates as the founder of Corporate Wellness Psychotherapists in New York City. Victoria, you are a blogger, a speaker. You've done speaking organizations with companies like Thomson Reuters, PayPal, all on the topics of employee mental health and wellness. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do some pretty cool things in your own form of wellness practices. I know some of them are more mainstream now, but one real thing that you do that I really like is like you said, you used to hate working out. And after 2 years now, you find enjoyment out of it. But on top of that, you're a cold plunger, and you
Yes.
love focusing on teaching people that they can do hard things and survive, which
Right.
I love. And I think that today we're going to we'll pull off of that and build on that. So let's dive in. Let's get started here and talking
Sure.
about employee wellness, mental wellness, and everything like that. In the world that we
hmm
live in, right? The world that we live in, it's, as we know, it's very unpredictable. There's a lot going on,
Yes.
and we're not gonna politicize this at all, but there's a lot happening, right? And
Yeah.
as humans, we have a sense of safety that we all
hmm
need. And you and I previously talked about the book, The Body Keeps a Score. It's a book by an author, Bessel van der Kolk. Um, and you and I talked, right? And you made the statement that our bodies and our brains are all connected.
hmm
Elaborate. Tell me.
well, sometimes we don't feel like it is. And to get back to that earlier point that you brought up around me exercising and doing the
Right.
the cold plunge, that's a really great way to realize that your body and your brain are connected. Because when you do things that are good for your physical health, it helps your mental health and vice versa. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, we've kind of grown up kind of separating those two for some reason. And I think a big part of, taking care of yourself is understanding how those two are deeply integrally connected to one another. And so a lot of the work that I do is really just helping people to understand that there are certain biological and physiological things that are happening to your body, especially when you're stressed and overwhelmed, that
Mhm.
happen and you don't have any control over it. And how do you start to understand what's happening and then start to exert a bit of control over it?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I started this practice quite a while ago where, weekly I challenge myself with workouts in the gym. And one thing, that I do now on a weekly basis is 5K, 5,000 meter row.
Oh, nice.
And doing that, but I track my time week to week, right? And I'm like every single week I'm out to beat it, which means I got to push a little bit harder to kind of beat that time. And I know eventually I'm going to hit a threshold there where I'm just going to kind of hit that maximum number, but like that's a weekly thing. And then I've incorporated like something that's even harder once a month, and then once a quarter. And on my quarterly, like an example, that would be doing a 10,000 meter row. And
hmm
then, one super really hard thing every year. But I think when you do that, you challenge your mind and you show yourself, because then when put it this way, but when the shitstorm shows up in our real life, we've proven to
hmm
ourselves already that we have the ability to adapt and overcome.
Yes.
Right. So what do you think, like, when it comes to these things? Like, what kind of things do you challenge other people to do that are difficult for them?
Yeah. Well, just some science behind what you're doing, which is there's a part of our brain, and I can't remember what it's called, but when you challenge yourself with physical activities or even or mental activities, that part of the brain increases. And this part of the brain has been shown for people who are older
Yeah.
uh, to have longevity, to like kind of starve off dementia and Alzheimer's. The people who actually do new and challenging things, they're able to function cognitively so much better as they're older. And
Hmm.
so, when even the rowing, even though it doesn't seem like it's kind of connected to longevity and being able to cognitively function well as you're older, what you are doing is you're building up this part of it's like a muscle and part of the brain that has been shown to be bigger in people who are functioning cognitively at a much younger level than their stated age, which is really amazing. And so that shows that we have a bit of control.
Is there a correlation then between starting when you're younger and doing something like that, or starting in, early adulthood or, mid adulthood versus starting later on when you're 60 or 70 or 80 and trying to do that? Or is there a build up to it, or is there any wrong time that somebody can start doing it to get those effects that you're just talking about?
Well, I don't know the answer to the question, but what I can say is that our brains are continuously developing. We used to think that it stopped developing at a certain period of time, and there is research around 25 to 29 is kind of when things like get solidified for us. But we know people, and I'm sure you probably know people that like in their 50s and 60s, even 70s, starting like strength training or starting cold plunge or starting
Yeah.
learning a new language. It's definitely not as easy when than when you're younger, but it's definitely doable, and you can try. And that's what the beauty of the neuroplasticity that we have as humans is. So I don't know the answer specifically, but what I would say, of course, things are easier when we're younger. A lot of
Yeah.
things easier when we're younger. But as we get older, we have the wisdom and the knowledge to say, okay, if I start making these changes, even now, I could potentially get that benefit, and we'll get that benefit, right? It feels so good to like do something like new. For example, like you said, exercising.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing it really before as much as I needed to be doing it. And these past 2 years, I've really like just astounded myself in the strength that I've been able to create
Hmm.
within my body, which actually also helps you to feel that sense of safety and security within your body, and then outwardly you kind of project that out, which I think is a really great way to kind of have that sense of security that we're probably going to be talking more about like later.
Yeah. Well, I nominate you to start the 30-year study now and let us know how it goes with regards to that. So,
Yeah, I'm sure somebody's already doing
yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, let's find out. I want to know more about that. But when we're talking about doing these things, right? So we know that trauma interferes with brain circuits.
Mhm.
It impacts things like focusing, being able to stay in emotional control, right? And that's kind of you're a wellness psychotherapist, right? So let's start to bring this into that trauma world and doing things that are difficult and challenging ourselves. And how does that connect now with, how trauma impacts us as human beings?
Well, so when you talk about trauma, like there's a lot of different things for people that they would consider traumatic for themselves.
Hmm.
Maybe other people might not consider as traumatic, and vice
Yeah.
versa. Like a traumatic thing could happen to somebody, and then I hear it like in a therapy room, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and they don't have that same connection to it. So it's really about how your body, brain, but mostly your body has interpreted something that happened that's traumatic. So if your body has not been able to reestablish a sense of safety and take whatever happened, for example, if you were in a car accident, take that car accident and say, okay, well, getting in a car the last time I got into a car, I got into this like accident.
Yeah.
Of course, my body is going to respond as if it's going to happen again, because it does not want that trauma to happen again, because it was so scary. You got injured, you went to the hospital, whatever happened. Your body does not want that to happen again. And so what it'll do, it'll tell you that you cannot go into the car, or it's going to be difficult to go into the car. It's going to happen again. And a part of what we're trying to do when we are in therapy or talking about like these traumatic things that happen to us is integrate that into our brains and to our bodies, so that when we go into a car again, we can feel that anxiety about, if we don't want to get into a car accident again, but we can overcome that. And so when we talk about trauma and what's happening, you're dealing with several different layers, and it comes down to how do you tell your body that things are going to be okay, even though you don't know that it will be okay. For example, again, in the car accident.
Hmm.
And so a big part of what we're trying to do here in therapy and just in life in general, right, is just really help people integrate what's happened to them and realize that they have been able to be okay and they've been able to survive things, and they'll be able to survive in the future.
Right. So how does somebody then begin to control, you got your body and your brain, there's a connection between the two,
Yeah.
and getting people to overcome that and control that when they're going through what trauma may be?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you can really control it. I think that the thing is you have to be aware of how your body and your brain and your mind, which is also another part of all of this,
Yeah.
is interacting. Like you have to have awareness that, oh wow, my body is starting to feel like tense and anxious and nervous. I'm feeling numb. I'm not feeling anything.
Hmm.
And that awareness helps you to say, oh, well, that's interesting. I wonder what it is. And then you start to connect things and connect potentially what happened to you in the past to what's going on now, and realize that you're actually okay, that you have some safety and that you have some control over it. And again, like your body doesn't have the control and you don't have full control over your body. There's a couple of different things that you could do. And these are things that techniques that I teach in my employee wellness and also with the people that I work with to help feel a bit of a sense of safety within your body. But it's the cognitive, like kind of process of awareness of knowing like what's happening. That's what's
Yeah.
really helpful.
Yeah. Well, and I think, a state of hypervigilance comes in and all of these things, and it
Mm-hmm.
and it can last a long time. Like I know for myself, even, I'm 3 years removed now from working in law enforcement, but there's one thing that still triggers me to this day. And for me, it happened in 2013. I unfortunately I watched somebody get run over by a train.
Oh my God.
And well, and that's everybody's reaction, right? So the way this is going to sound like weird and crazy, I guess, but so for me to get over the impact of that, I kind of broke it down like, okay, this is what happens when somebody, and I looked at it
Mm-hmm.
like scientifically, okay, and everything that went with the trauma of that. But to this day, if I get stuck at a train crossing, trains don't bother me. I rode on a train last week. But when I
Mm-hmm.
was walking away from that train and it started to leave again and it was blaring its horn, I have to stop. I have to just wait. It passes, it goes by. And within 10 seconds, the feelings that come back from me, they're gone. Right. But it's
Mm-hmm.
so, I guess where I'm going with this, right, is like traumas can show up from years and years past. Right. So, what does somebody do? And from past traumas and how it impacts people, right? So you deal with corporate wellness, right? Somebody has
Mm-hmm.
something happen in their life when they're a child or as an adult, whenever it may be. How do they work through that? Because the biggest thing for me is letting go, okay, you know what, this happened, I can't change it, but I can't also let it control me.
Right. Right. Well, to your example, which is I mean, I'm so sorry that that happened to you, but it's a really good example of what one does do around that.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you built awareness. You said you kind of scientifically like realized what happened,
Yeah.
right? And so there
I
was
had to
a
justify it
cognitive,
somehow. I had to justify it
yeah,
somehow, right?
right,
In my
right.
brain.
And that's what we need to do with the trauma that we've experienced is we kind of have to justify. And look, there's so many things that happen that are so unfair and don't make any sense. Why would somebody, abuse a child? Like why would somebody do any of these things? Like it's really heartbreaking and it's hard to like make sense of it, but people do that. They do
Hmm.
abuse children. People do get run over by trains. I mean, these are things that happen unfortunately. But so as you're kind of cognitively coming to an awareness of, okay, this happened and this is why I am feeling this way or experiencing it. So that's one level. The other level is what you just mentioned around hearing the blaring noise of
Hmm.
like the train track. So what happens there is that your body, because of the perceptions that we have, and we have uh, more perceptions than the five senses, but I think it's just a good example to go to the sound.
Hmm.
The sound that you heard triggered probably your body to respond as if you were potentially in that situation again. And that's
Okay.
something that you can't control, because
Right.
it's something that you're automatically, your body is responding to that sound. It can happen with smell. It could happen with seeing something. It could
Yeah.
happen with flashbacks. Because a lot of times people who have PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder, which is a result of having like a traumatic experience, is
Hmm.
your body, your brain will flash to memory for whatever reason. And it could be because of a sound. It could be something that just you're not even consciously aware of.
Hmm.
And so the point is that there, it's so ingrained in us and ingrained in our bodies that we have to give so much respect to how the intelligence is within our body around like a sound that says, okay, like somebody could get hit by the train again, like this could happen again. You're not consciously thinking that, but that's what your body is responding to. But you've already done the work cognitively to say, okay, this thing happened. I understand like why it happened. I mean, even though sometimes again we don't have that understanding, and that it's okay, and seeing a train is not going to trigger me, or being on a train is not going to trigger me, but you may potentially have a trigger of something that is related to that, and you just have to go back to giving yourself space, which it sounds like you did. You said you did 10 seconds of just like kind of like, oh, okay, it's happening. I'm feeling that like anxiety, or I'm feeling that like, not feeling safe. And then you were able to kind of get back online, which
Yeah.
is
It's
exactly what you
interesting
do.
how your senses all play into it, because the sight doesn't bother me. I can see train. I can see, when I'm in my
Right.
vehicle, so that train tracks doesn't bother me. It's the sound, right? That's triggering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're looking at, and so, for me, and I want, see what your thoughts are on this, right? Anything that I've ever experienced through that career and that I look at now and what I'm doing, the work with workplace violence, school-based violence, human trafficking, child exploitation awareness, is I look at everything didn't happen to me, it happened for me. And everything, and I think that's a really key thing that people need to pick up on in life and go, because I can't go back in the past and erase
Mm-hmm.
any trauma that's ever happened to somebody. But if we start to adapt that mindset that, and it's tough going, well, what do you mean this happened for me? No, it happened to me. No, if you look at it how it happened for you and you use that trauma to grow through it and to build and find a way to use it, you got to turn it into power almost
Mm-hmm.
and use it for good. I think that's a huge step that people can really go through, because we can't, like I said, we can't go back and erase it.
Right. Right. Well, what you're talking is there's a term called post-traumatic growth. So instead
Yeah.
of post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic growth, which
Hmm.
eventually can and will happen if you do a few things first. And I think that unfortunately people kind of skip this. Like they want to go from, oh, this happened and now I'm a better person for it. Well, it's really, really challenging to be diagnosed with like a cancer, or have a loss of somebody who you really love and care about, or have something happen to you that should not have happened to you, and say that I've learned from this, and I'm in it, and happened it for me. I think you have to go through the grieving process. You have
Hmm.
to process the loss of like what it potentially could have taken away. I always think of, as I've been working in this field for over 25 years. And, I've worked with a lot of people who've had really very traumatic things happen to them that should not have happened, like children who should not have been abused by their parents, or,
Yeah.
and I know you've experienced, with the field that you're in. And so it's really kind of challenging for someone to get through that without getting the support, and without processing, and without grieving the loss of all that comes with it. And I think that our bodies keep the score, in the sense that even though you could cognitively say that I've learned from this and I'm a better person, or like I wouldn't be here where I am, and I think most people would feel that way. As a matter of fact, they have done studies where, people who've had trauma have and where they are now, 90% of them would say, yeah, even though that happened, I wouldn't be where I am today. But there's that other
Right.
10%, and it's still like a struggle, because your body still does keep the score of, if you were abused by somebody and you see or hear a voice that sounds familiar to that abuser, then automatically your body goes into that fight, flight, and freeze. It just automatically does that if you haven't done the work. So not being able to get through that is a challenge. It's a challenge to do it on your own, but it's something that you have to do in order to really be able to, and I wouldn't even say truly resolve the trauma and move forward, because I think sometimes, a lot of people don't want to hear this, but like the reality is, it is hard to move through the trauma and things that have happened and move forward, but you do it. And a lot of people do it. It's just that, it's always going to be there with you. And because it shouldn't have happened and it wasn't supposed to happen, that's the like where it kind of gets like stuck. And you may not, get fully over it. And that's okay. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just
And
don't want it to ruin your life.
that's it. It's about not letting it control you either, right? And like you said, you don't want it to ruin your life. And so when you're working, because you do this in corporate wellness, right?
Hmm.
Organizations, big or small, right? Almost everybody has some form of trauma in their life. And you said at the start of this that, something along the lines like what impacts me may not impact you, or what impacts you may not impact me, right? Trauma is different to everybody. So how can organizations, knowing that it's happening within, start to look at what they can do to help their employees beyond maybe traditional EAP programs, or we live in a reactive world, right? So
Hmm.
we wait for this trauma to manifest itself and show up. And Victoria's a really great employee, and then all of a sudden it's like, what just happened to Victoria? Like, why is this going on, right? How can we provide like preventative care or preventative education?
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a lot of the work that you're doing, right? And a lot of the work
Yeah.
that I'm doing, which is like the world is uncertain, and there are people who unfortunately are around and don't have good intentions, and that it impacts us all. I mean, we all read the paper or listen to the news and hear horrific stories around what other people do to other people, and we spend most of our time at work. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, when we're hearing or experiencing things in our personal life, it is impacting our work. And a part of what companies and organizations can start to do is have these conversations around like the sense of safety, the sense of like, how do you feel a little bit of certainty within the work that you're doing within the company that makes you feel like it's a safe place and an okay place to have conversations, and to be able to feel that sense of psychological safety, which is a big word that, I'm sure a lot of, people have heard already, because we use that a lot in therapy, but we're using it also now and at work, because we spend so much time at work, and it's an integral part too, even, there's a lot of remote work. So it's starting to also, it is a part of like our home too. So that sense of safety is so important, and having these conversations about like what's happening, I think, is imperative.
Yeah. Well, and we don't walk around with a big trauma stamp on our forehead, right? To say, treat me easy. But when you are working in environments and you wear other people's stuff as well, everybody's carrying their
Hmm.
own, but then you start to wear everybody else's stuff. And it's like that death by a thousand nicks,
Hmm.
right? And then one little thing or one big thing happens and it just starts to break people down. So the preventative care in all aspects of life. So it's like cold plunging. It's like doing
Hmm.
something, it's like doing something that's tough for you. Those things prepare you for the future and in those moments to show you that you can get through these things.
Yeah.
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 So what, like from your perspective and your profession, top 3 to 5 things that organizations can do to proactively
Hmm.
help their employees, And number two, that individuals can do to proactively help themselves.
Yeah. Well, so I think let's start with the individual because I think it's important. Individuals need to be able to figure out if they're in the right place in the right organization
Yeah.
because oftentimes like and it depends upon what your goals are. Like, I had somebody I was talking to this morning who is a very creative person. You can just tell, lights up with like, talking about art, but does like computer engineering,
Yeah.
which is not necessarily that creative, at least in the way that, she would want it to be. And so really recognizing why you're there at the job. What is it doing for you? Maybe it's like supplementing your creative side, or maybe you do really enjoy. I think there's like an idea that you have to have meaning and purpose in the work that you're doing fully is a fallacy because not everybody can find the work that they love to do and do it. I mean, I happen to be lucky. I think you are also very lucky in that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not a lot of people can find that. So it's like, for the job that you have now, are you in the right job for you
Oh
and
my
in the
God.
right environment? Like that's the
Yeah.
most important thing individually. And then the
And
second thing
never to
with
give up
that,
on that. People don't have to settle and just say, well, this is the way it is for the next 20 or 30 years.
right, exactly. And I think, these new generations, they're not settling. Like,
No,
you
they're
hear
not.
all of the quiet quitting, all the different things that are happening on TikTok around working and
And it brings back to show why organizations need to be really stepping up and showing their people that they truly care beyond them just showing up to be a cog in the wheel,
right,
because your younger generation isn't settling and they will job hop until they find, or career hop until they find one that brings them joy
right,
or they
right.
feel
Yeah,
supported in.
exactly. Until they feel supported in, but also too until they realize that like, oh, this is good for me now, but then moving, I need to grow and move forward, and that's actually
Yeah.
really important. So that would be like another piece of an employee is understanding for them how they want to grow and whether or not that organization can support it or not. And I think that that's really important. So understanding like if you're in the right environment, I would say for most people, uh, stress is something that happens both personally and also with work. And again, we spend most of our time at work when we really kind of like think about it. We spend a lot of time at work, and
Yeah.
it seems like these days too. I have people that I work with, and the companies that I work with, is that everybody's feeling like they're doing not only their job, but they're doing two or three other people's jobs
Hmm.
in addition to their own. There is a lot of overwhelm and feeling burnt out. And I think how organizations can help is they can start having conversations around what the reality is of what the workload is and how as like one person, how much can one person kind of tolerate. There are some outliers, and I think
Yeah.
oftentimes a lot of the outliers are looked as the average when they're really not the average. There's some people who are able to work a lot and not burn out. Eventually, they will probably burn out.
Yeah.
But most people really have just a window of tolerance. And I think if companies and organizations understood that, then we could start to implement some other things like employee wellness programs, mental health, to kind of give strategies for those employees to be able to take better care of themselves.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, you do have those high flyers, right? Like the people who can just you can lay it on them, but eventually when you burn the candle from both ends, right, it eventually does come to
Yeah.
a kind of a screeching halt with a lot of people, right? um, the wellness aspect, the work that you're doing as a psychotherapist, especially in the corporate world, I think it's so needed today. And not just for the people, but for helping organizations realize, right, that organizations need to realize, and I'll bring this back to the trafficking or exploitation world, that unfortunately we live in a world where we are all just 1 degree removed from knowing somebody, whether we know it or not, who's been impacted by these things somewhere along in their
Hmm.
life. And we have to start to recognize that trauma shows up in a lot of different ways, a lot of different things. It can be death, it can be sexual trauma, it can be from a car accident you talked about earlier, right? But there needs to be that support there and level of care to help your people go through it. We have to normalize it a little bit and say, we
Mm-hmm.
understand that this happens, and you have to give them the tools that they can to be able to really thrive. Because if they're thriving, your company's going to thrive,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Well, the companies and organizations now are seen as like communities.
Yeah,
And before we did have stronger communities. Maybe it was because of spirituality. It was because there was smaller towns, smaller places. Now people are in bigger areas and cities, and there's not a lot of like real community or sense of community. And so with work, it starts to become that. And so you're right. Like, so there's kind of a new new work order instead of a new world order, a new work order around how do you support your employees in all facets of life. And because, like you said, the reality is that these things have touched everybody in some way, shape, or form. Even if you're,
yeah,
just listening to the news and hear like a horrific story or hear about what's happening, you're still impacted. And so I think organizations kind of, whether they want to or not, and it's really a big challenge, but they are being looked to as a new community, and how can they
absolutely.
support the members of this community for however long the members are there for.
100%, 100%. I love that. Where can people find you?
So I have a website, wellness psychotherapist nyc.com, and I'm on LinkedIn under Victoria Rivera. And I have also a corporate wellness psychotherapist practice, and that's under LinkedIn as well. I am on Instagram. I give free mental health and awareness advice just every week to just help people kind of get through difficult times. And that's at
Yeah.
Wellness Psychotherapist.
Awesome. And you got a lunch and learn coming up.
I do. Oh, yes. I'm so excited. So it's Employee Appreciation Day tomorrow.
Yes.
And many companies and organizations are honestly like just really struggling financially with trying to like support their employees and show appreciation. This is a great way for employees to and organizations to be able to do that for their employees. So I am hoping that people will attend. It's 12 to 1 Eastern
Yeah.
time, and it's going to be fun. I'm really excited. I don't get a chance to kind of
Can see
do,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I don't get a chance to kind of do like this fun. I mean, it is my job is fun in a way that like I get to teach people how to take better care of themselves. But this is kind of like a real like fun one because it's about appreciating yourself and other people, and I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. Well, after that's all done, I want to grab a link of it and connect it here to the show for anybody listening, right? I mean, it's tomorrow.
Yes,
So
I know
the
it's short notice.
podcast won't be out tomorrow, but that's all good. But I want to be able to connect people to that afterwards. So, Victoria, thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do in corporate wellness. And for anybody who's listening, right, as we talked about today, that trauma shows up in all different forms, in all different ways. So,
Mm-hmm.
don't ever feel as though you're alone. Don't feel as though you have to navigate this alone, right? It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to seek help no matter what it is that you're experiencing in your life, whether it's for yourself or somebody else. And if it is somebody else, you can begin to be that support. Take some of the context here, what Victoria's talked about today. Provide them with information. You don't have to become their psychotherapist for them, but
Mm-hmm.
you can lead them to the help that they can get. And that's kind of probably the best thing that you can do. So if you learned something today on this podcast, share it with people, tell somebody about it. Victoria, thank you again so much for joining us here. And this has been another episode of Shield the Vulnerable, Untold Stories. Victoria, thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. I appreciate it.